Hey y'all, welcome to Chill Chats, the Chill Counseling Team podcast, your space for real conversations about all things wellness, from joy to pain to sunshine to rain. We're therapists, but this podcast isn't therapy and it isn't a substitute for professional care. Even if you're a Chill Counseling client, what we share here is for conversation, not counseling. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and if you need support, reach out to a professional. Now let's get into it. I'm Cori Hill, licensed professional counselor and licensed marriage and family therapist supervisor, and today I'm stepping in as your host to highlight one of our incredible team members at Chill Counseling. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Erica Lewis, counselor intern, who is completing her practicum hours under my supervision. That means she's in the final stage of her graduate program, fulfilling her last degree requirement before pursuing licensure. At Chill Counseling, we believe in amplifying the voices of our interns because they bring fresh perspectives and a deep commitment to learning and growth. This episode is a chance to not only explore today's topic, unresolved grief, but also to get to know Erica and the experiences that have shaped her as a future clinician. Before we dive in, I do want to give a content warning. This episode includes discussions about grief, loss, and trauma, including mentions of suicide and a personal story involving gun violence. If you need to take care of yourself by pausing, skipping parts, or coming back later, please do so. With that, let's jump in. Here's my conversation with Erica Lewis, counselor intern, on unresolved grief. Hey, Erica.
Hi, Cori.
I'm so excited to talk to you today. And I was thinking about before this how I've obviously been on the team the longest, and right now you are the newest member of the team. So there's something kind of cool about us having this conversation.
Yes, and I'm so happy to be here, and I'm happy you give me the opportunity even to have this conversation. I know it's going to be very impactful, informative, and you'll really get to learn a lot more about me than you've already probably known so far.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming a therapist. What drew you into the field?
Whew, okay. So, for me, I'm not gonna make this my therapy session. So there's two parts to it. So one of the things, I was probably in my early 20s and I had a lot of stress. So this is more of a medical side. And I remember like my work stress was very high and my blood pressure was out the roof, like 200 over 180. And the doctors were like, "Oh, you're too young for this and you're going through a lot. Let's give you this medication." And one of the things that stuck out to me is they kind of boxed me in like you're Black or African American, so you're prevalent and you're prone to high blood pressure and diabetes. So this is probably your route anyway. Here goes some medication. Never looking into my mental, never figuring out like how to get me to understand my stress, what's triggering me, what's causing it. And so I took a more holistic route, lost weight, started eating right, and I never had blood pressure problems again. But it was leading to like stroke. High blood pressure leads to that. But what causes high blood pressure for a lot of people is your mental. Oftentimes, your eating habit, not taking care of yourself. And so when I started making those changes, I realized like I need help with my mental. And so the second part of that was the mental health. I dealt with some traumatic experiences. I had a really close friend of mine, one of my best friends growing up, took her own life. And I always wanted to be there for her, but I wish she had that support that I once got. And so when I went through my own traumas, this is really dark, but I had some traumas happen at work. And I was actually held up at gunpoint multiple times. And the one that triggered me the most was actually my son was held up at gunpoint with me because I was an overachiever. I brought him to work and I was just trying to stop in and take care of something really quick. And now he has a gun to his head and he's 6 years old at that time. And so my job actually was like, take time off, go to therapy. Like they just said, do that, don't worry about work. We love you. We want you to get better. And I'm very thankful that they did that. And that actually started my therapeutic journey. I didn't realize I didn't know how to cope with things. I didn't realize I didn't know how to deal with stress. I didn't realize like my communication was showing up as aggression. I thought it was passion, but other people are receiving it like, dang, what's wrong with you? And so therapy introduced me to a different way of like being and showing up and living. And so that's where I really got my passion from it. I was always driven to talking to people. I was always someone that people could talk to and they trusted me because I'm so real and compassionate. But it took me to go through my journey and see like if I didn't go to therapy, I wouldn't be able to show up as a mom for my son, and I might have gone down a darker path to handling life, right? And so when I started going to therapy, getting different therapists that don't relate to me, so I'm spending half my session trying to explain to you,
Mm-hmm.
generational trauma, but you don't get it. You're like, you're strong, you got this. I'm not strong.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I want to be weak. I want to be vulnerable. And I needed someone that could show me I had a safe space. And so that's what actually drove me to really taking it serious. And I noticed that my passion comes out when it comes to people because it's like, I feel you. I see you. I know what you went through. I'm not going to enable you, but I can empower you to be better. And so that's how my journey started. It really started from me having my
Wow.
life experiences and going through my own processes and realizing how much better, I have been with therapy.
That's amazing. And you were right. I'm learning about you because I didn't know
Yeah.
like the details
Yeah.
of your journey to the
Yeah.
field. So I'm so honored to be able to walk alongside you and
Yeah.
provide that support via supervision and just a fellow human as you
Yeah.
get to provide that type of support to other people that you didn't get that you so needed.
Yeah. No, and I thank you. And it's for me, like I know that some of the past things I've dealt with can be a little deep and dark and I've processed them, but sometimes I tell people and I'm like, okay, they may not have been ready to hear that. So I kind of try to make sure I'm in a setting to share my story because I've worked
We'll
really
put a trigger
hard.
warning and content
Yeah,
warning.
yes. Yes,
Yeah.
please do. Because it's like I know that it can be triggering. So I try not to share certain things with people because I know although I've processed, somebody may be going through their own, and I try to respect that. But yeah.
Sure. But I love that you felt comfortable to share that because I know as therapists we do have like there's a certain level of disclosure that's professional and that's not. And so we even when we're outside of the therapy space, really monitoring like what we share publicly. But I do think that there is something about knowing that the person that's sitting across from you and walking with you in your pain also has experienced their own and does maybe not fully understand your experience, but like they know what pain is, they know what loss is, and so that's amazing. And
Mhm.
you turning those experiences into like this work and
Mhm.
being able to hold space. So tell me a little bit about like what populations, like what people you
Mhm.
like to work with and what you like to help them with.
Absolutely. I've been prone to my clients being young adults, our Gen Z millennials, trying to figure it out. We all have. I'm a millennial as well. We just have all these markers we got to hit. We're trying to figure out life. We may have been given different tools that may not be prevalent now. So, those in that space trying to figure it out. The anxiety approach, because I feel like a lot of us are high anxiety and we don't see it. We don't realize how it shows up in our lives. And so the people that I work with have been, they're trying to figure that out, but they need the tools and they need the professional tools for someone like myself who not only has experienced it, so I can give you my compassion. I'll be real with you, but I'm gonna empower, and I always empower my clients to take a different approach, and reframe how you see life because there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and so that's what I'm here to do because I know that sometimes you don't get that, and sometimes you need that comfort level to be vulnerable, and it is okay. Especially men. Sometimes men aren't open to showing their feelings, and I'm a safe space. I'm here for it.
Yeah, I think that's something that's so important and part of what I saw in meeting you initially. You know, that's a value that we have at the practice to be able to provide this type of space to people who are less likely to find that out in the world growing up in their communities. Because if we're talking about BIPOC, LGBTQ, people with disabilities,
Mhm.
different just differences where you might not find people that get you, but we have a team of people that do. And even if we don't understand, we will take it back to the team, we'll collaborate,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, we'll do our education and training. I was just speaking with someone else on the team yesterday, and they were like, okay, my client brought up this. I'm about to do this training. Like, we really do mean it. Like, if we don't get it, we are going to figure it out, because we don't want clients to have the experience you mentioned you had, where you're spending half your session just trying to make it make sense to somebody else when you're trying to make sense of it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, be close to where I am so we can process this
Yes,
together. So, yes.
absolutely. Yeah, and then we
Okay.
have the professionalism, the training behind it, and so it's like we already I can understand, and we're all not the same, but I can feel you in some way, and then I'll
Yes.
add the educational piece to take you to the next level. So yeah.
Yeah. And we come in like so many different flavors. So can you talk
Hmm.
about like what your therapeutic style and approach is?
Oh,
What's it like for a
absolutely.
client?
Yes. I'm a listener. I use a CBT approach. I love to listen, but I can't help you reframe your thoughts in your mind without empowering you to see things for what they are. A lot of times, we put on our subjective goggles, we put on our victim goggles. I'm gonna let you have that. I'm gonna let you have your moment. You speak in your truth. It's your truth. You own it. But I'm gonna empower you to see things from a different lens and a different perspective, so we can do the work and add in the tools. But I have to empower my clients. If I don't and I figure it out for them, then we just what was good was the session. So I'm really big on empowerment. I love being real. I've always gotten that feedback. It's like when I'm trying to put on or present in a certain way, it comes off so fake and phony. I have to be myself for you to really get the full grasp of where I'm coming from. But I'm gonna be compassionate too. I'm a big component of compassion. We need that. We need to feel the empathy, and so I like to mix all of those up and really hold you to your standards and hold you accountable, but in an empowering way.
Yeah, I love that. I felt something in my heart when you said compassion, and we need that because we do. Like, that really is, if we had more love, if we had more community, if we had more empathy,
Mm-hmm.
like that would resolve so many different things.
It
So
would,
I can see you
yes.
bringing all of those things to session
Yes.
based on my experience with you so far.
Yes.
Like, definitely real, definitely empowering, even to other people on the team. Like, definitely
Yeah.
compassionate. So yeah, I don't
Absolutely.
get to experience you as a client, but I get to see your work with them. So,
Yeah.
truly amazing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, Okay, so you are a counselor intern,
Mm-hmm.
and I know sometimes, and I remember from my own experience when I was an intern, people hear that word and they start thinking like inexperienced, like, this is my health, this is my mind, like I'm letting you in my head
Yeah.
as an intern, I don't know. And I will say, like, my experience at Chill has been really cool because a lot of clients are actually very open to working
Mm-hmm.
with interns. But I want to talk a little bit about like why that doesn't need to be something people kind of turn their head away from. Like, what do you bring to the space as a newer clinician?
Oh yeah, I remember. I told someone recently that I was a counselor intern, and they were like, "Oh," but I found myself having to elaborate, and so definitely, being a counselor intern, I'm supervised by the beautiful Cori Hill, and
Oh,
she. And so I get to learn different perspectives. Our team is amazing. We have a lot of brilliant women on our team, and we're all supportive. Like I felt from day one, before I even started, that I was part of a community of professionals that really want to see all of us win, and so that really helps. So I have tools and resources that I can go to. I have somebody I can call if we need to refer. We have a team of people that are always connecting and collaborating with others. I know being an intern, obviously I'm gaining my hours, but I have hours of experience in the real world. And that is one of the reasons why shared my story earlier, because one thing you can't take away is life experience. When I first wanted to do this journey, I hadn't experienced those traumas. I hadn't experienced those, mishaps in my life. I hadn't experienced how stress really can affect my day to day. But like growing as a woman, I've been able to live that and see it for myself. And it really helps tell it's more telling. It's things you cannot learn in the books. I'm sorry. We learn a lot. Trust me, we do learn a lot. We educate. We
Mm-hmm.
read. I have to research a lot, and so like being new, and being an intern, I'm like doubling back, looking back, reading, listening to informationals, having audio books going while I'm driving because I'm trying to make sure that I come as my best counselor self to you as my client. So it's a fresh mindset. It's a fresh set of ears. And so, yeah, experience it comes with it, but we all got to start somewhere. So don't be afraid. Like, don't be afraid. My team is amazing and we're going to make sure you're taken care of.
Yeah, I love that because I do think that something that's important that a lot of people don't know is most of this is based on research. Most of the change that we see happen for clients is just through that therapeutic relationship. So you actually,
Mm-hmm.
I guess techniques can help and
Yeah.
what theories you apply, all of that. But that therapeutic relationship, like that space of, and what you bring to it, being empowering, being real, being compassionate, like that is accountable for the majority of the change. And so you bringing that alone is everything, but you do have life experience, you do get it, and you have fresher information. So those of
Mm-hmm.
us that graduated some time ago, we don't need to say years. Um, like it's we have to. I mean, we stay caught up. Like that's the
Yeah.
requirement of the field, right? We do
Yeah.
continuing education, but it's still like it's fresher for y'all, and y'all are eager
Mm-hmm.
and like still figuring things out, so you're possibly more comfortable with experimenting and not in like a risky way because you do have the support of a licensed supervisor, but also in a way where it's like, okay, like I'm figuring out what works, and you're so curious. And I know that I still have clients that I may have started with when I was a counselor intern that I've worked with off and on over the last several years because yeah, I didn't. I wasn't negligent. I wasn't reckless.
Yeah.
I cared, and
Yeah.
so, and that's something I appreciate about supervising. Honestly, is that I get to keep learning from y'all. Like y'all keep me
Mm-hmm.
fresh. So
Yeah.
yeah, I highly recommend the counselor interns. Yeah. Okay, so I know today we're here to talk about grief and
Mm-hmm.
specifically unresolved grief. So, can you talk about like what made you interested in working with clients who might be navigating unresolved grief?
Yeah, grief. Often when we experience grief, we don't realize how much it keeps showing up in our lives. We don't realize that when we don't unpack or deal with that grief, especially with the 5 stages of grief, a lot of times we end up in the stage of depression, but you don't realize that's what you're in. And so grief was one of those things I did want to talk about because obviously we all have to experience it. Some people don't experience it to a certain point in their lives, but one of the things is we're not equipped with the tools on our own to grieve properly, right? To grieve so that you're not going back into that dark place, so that you're not making your life, it's showing up in different ways. It'll show up in avoidance. You don't want to be around people. You don't want people to see you in that way. So now you've isolated. Now you've got comfortable isolating. So now you don't have a
Mm-hmm.
friend circle. You don't have support because no one, you're doing so many things, and it can lead to other stages of depression, or it can lead to suicide ideation. And you have to be very careful with grief because the biggest thing with grief is people don't realize it's a form of love, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
grieve, but it's love. That is a love and passion you had for that job you're grieving that you lost, or that person that in your family that meant a lot to you. And I don't think we're normally equipped to deal with grief. We're normally taught move on, be strong. People have their empathy for you that first month because it's fresh on their mind. But then the world keeps spinning. Rent still due. Your kids still got to eat. And then you
Yeah.
start to isolate. You forget to go work out. Or you're using, your glass of wine turns into a bottle or two, and then it becomes every night. Now you have insomnia. Now you're not sleeping, so you're not taking care of yourself. You're not resetting. It just keeps showing up in different ways, and over time it can be detrimental to your well-being. And so that's why I think grief is important, and we have to do it when we're ready. But I always encourage people, like, don't wait too long to the point where you're like, okay, now I'm up here. And it's showing up
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. You might have anger. That is a part of grief too. You know, you may resent the fact that you lost your loved one because it's like, that was a good person. So you have this anger, and that pent up anger comes out in your connections with people, friends, relationships, your significant other, and your communication is not, you know, clear, or you start trauma bonding, but then you still got to work on it. You have to work on it. And that's why I took I took a liking to it. Um, and I think it also comes from like, I remember I lost a loved one and I grieved for like 2 years, like in grieving, and I was stuck. And I didn't realize I was stuck in a state of depression, but I was. But I had to wake myself up because when people see me, it's like, Erica's the life of the party. When I go home, I'm in the dark, quiet. Can't be too quiet because I have children, so, you know, I have to put on my mask for them and be the mommy. But I'm, you know, what triggered me to realize it, my car was dirty all the time. I hate a dirty car. So I had to see that. And so
Mm.
sometimes having that help from a professional, they help you unpack things and help you empower you. Like, I empower people to recognize the differences from pre grief to after. And what are you doing to change that?
Wow, you said so much.
Did.
You did like there's
Yeah.
so many pieces in there, but I'll just start with where you ended. Grief looks different for everybody. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like you said, like you might be showing up in spaces where people wouldn't even know what you're navigating, but it's something like, okay, for you, like your car not being clean and organized is a sign because it's so out of your norm. Whereas for
Mm-hmm.
somebody else, that might just be like, yeah, I don't really care about that. It might not have anything to do with grief at all. They could just be
Mm-hmm.
busy. But you recognize that as a sign for you that like this is something I ordinarily would prioritize, and a disruption to what is typical for me, what's normal for me, is a sign something is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it often, you know, we're not aware that we're going through it. Like, you know, you're going through it. But then you start to feel like, oh, I'm better now. You didn't work through it. So are you better? That's the key. Because then if
Mm-hmm.
something else happens or something triggers you, did you really work through it? Did you really grieve and process and actually go through it and face it, and accepting it? Um, Sometimes we don't realize we're not there, and that's why it really does take, you know, the professional work. You don't have to be alone. You really don't. You have, you know, you have counselors like me that really are passionate about helping you navigate through that, because not everybody may always see it. And like you know, you rephrased for me, I'm showing up in spaces and people don't realize, like, they see the outside looking in, so they're seeing like, oh, she's good, she's probably better now, and I'm fighting for my life inside, but no one would know. And so that's why it's important to get a
Mm-hmm.
therapist. It is.
Yeah. And you mentioned that like a lot of other ways that grief can show up, because I think when people think about grief, they think about loss. They usually think about death, even though you also mentioned, that could be you lost a job, it could be a breakup, it could be a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But people think about grief as like sadness, and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
always look like depression. That's just like one of the possible responses.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you kind of like you broke down a lot. Are there any other misconceptions about grief that you think people should know about?
Yeah, I did break down a lot. I I also think, like, I don't know if I touched on avoidance. We do avoid, you know, we
Mm,
may avoid a relationship, right? You grieve, you're afraid to get back out there. You put that wall up. It's like, nah, can't nobody touch me no more. Or connections with other people. You keep your connections surface level so that you don't ever have to feel that love again. And you eventually have to decide, is that something that you want to do? Because then you may meet someone, or you may have a connection with a friend or a family member or even a significant other, and they're loving you for who you are on the outside, and they're trying to get in, but you're putting that wall up. You're not letting them in, and you're like, I'm not gonna get married till I'm 60, because you're like, I'm avoiding. I'm just gonna
mm,
avoid that love. And if that's something that you choose, you know, hey, live in your truth. But is it something that you really want? Do you really want to avoid relationships for the rest of your life? Because good relationships are support systems. You know, you have people that can support you in ways emotionally that you didn't realize, so you could be missing out on that. And so avoidance is real. It's real. People put walls up to protect themselves. And you have to start realizing, am I protecting my peace, or am I just avoiding experiencing love like that ever again?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That gave me chills. That idea of like where how we could even trick ourselves into thinking that something that we're doing is protecting us, but it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's, keeping us stuck. So I love that
Yeah.
you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, and then you also mentioned anger. So, like, when it comes to like anger or rage, what might be some things that would be helpful, or like, or even with avoidance? Like, what are some things that people can do to better cope when they're experiencing things like avoidance or anger?
Yeah, it takes the work because you have to recognize it first. If you're experiencing anger or rage, obviously you may have outbursts and things like that. So grounding techniques, or getting with a therapist that is specialized in, different techniques like EMDR, it does help with learning how to ground yourself, and it helps you reframe and change your approaches and reactions to things. I know, like even being in therapy with reframing, you think of things in a different light. You look at it from a different perspective, and so you can start to control what you can control, because nobody can control your reaction but you, right? So you
Mhm.
have to learn how to control that. You have to put the work in for yourself, but you have to recognize it's there. And if you don't feel like it's there, that's why it's important to have professional therapists to kind of walk you through what that looks like. Hey, let's walk through what happened. Let's walk through. Tell me about your day. What triggered you? We're not going to judge you. We're human. We all have our own reactions, but it's not about what you've been through. It's about what you plan on doing and where you're going. And so you really have to recognize that in yourself.
Yeah, I like that you said that, because when we talk about grief, a lot of times we're also talking about like traumatic loss.
Hmm.
And so we're seeing a lot of responses to like your world shifting like that. I mean, that's
Hmm.
essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about trauma. Like your world's changed, your identity's changed, like how you interact with people, like all of that has shifted.
Hmm.
And so when we're doing trauma therapy, like, yes, like you said, the grounding techniques, we want to first get people stable. Can you regulate your nervous system? And then ultimately, we're trying to get out of the like past that's stuck, like in our brain. And I'm sure we'll do a whole episode to
Hmm.
talk more about trauma.
Yeah.
And maybe we need like multiple wins, but yeah, we're trying to make sense of the past, and like, and then once we have that puzzle kind of figured out, we can move forward into the future. So there are a lot of different pathways. You mentioned EMDR, so that's one of the tools that I use. There
Hmm.
is a trauma focused CBT that can be effective as well. So a lot of things that are evidence based, and I know one of the things that we do at Chill is everybody uses evidence based practices, but we interweave that with cultural humility and our
Hmm.
understanding of like just from our own lived experience, and then we also add in a lot of creative approaches. So I know one of like, well, I'll just give kind of like a loose example, like somebody that might be very artistic, like we might bring that into the space too. So you might help somebody reframe, but maybe it's through like some type of drawing or something where they're
Hmm.
rewriting their story. And yeah, there's a lot of different approaches that we bring together, but ultimately, like you said, like we're getting out of the past into the future, and it's
Hmm.
not a switch. Because if it
Yeah.
was a switch, if it was that easy, we would all just do that
Yeah.
when we were experiencing grief, right? So, um,
Yeah.
yeah, but you
Yeah.
get to help them gradually like turn that dial from like stuck to flexible, from hopeless to hopeful, and so on.
Yeah. And thank you for that. I also, I do want to touch on, because grief comes in different forms. We always think of grief
Mm.
as the loss of a human or pet, but it can be in a form of like losing a relationship or losing a job that you felt like you worked hard for, and you were blindsided, and you may grieve that. You may have the anger from that because you kind of feel played, like you worked hard, you felt like you were doing your best, and somebody cuts you off, and now it's like you may avoid ever having that type of job again, or putting yourself out there again. And so there are forms of grief that don't have to do with death. um, you have to grieve that too and process it so that you can show up as your best person for your next career opportunity. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Your next career opportunity, your next relationship.
Yeah.
I know one example I use is sometimes it's literally just a change in who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So moms experience this
Mm.
when their kids leave the house, when athletes have an injury when they can no longer play or
Yes.
they age out, whatever it may be, they can experience grief. Someone could have some sort of injury that alters their physical appearance and experience grief. And so,
Yes.
yeah, there is a lot of shifting
Yeah.
grief that comes with just aging sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I've been sitting in this chair for a minute and I can tell, and I didn't used to be able to tell. Like there might be a
Yes.
little grief around that, but
Oh yeah.
yeah, I love
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I know at the beginning you kind of talked about some of your own experiences with like health, but can you talk about how unresolved grief can end up leading to more severe mental health disorders and then even impacting your physical health?
Yes. I kind of touched on it earlier. Unresolved grief, because you're going through the stages of grief and it can happen gradually. It can take years for you to realize it. There are different ways that it can show up. So let's say let's use substances. If you're using substances to cope, you're not getting the proper rest. Your brain's foggy. You're not operating in your best on your day to day, and over time that takes a toll on you. And so now, you may start to pick up M- MDD, which is MDD. It's not coming out.
Yeah.
It's not coming
You can
out.
just
Get it?
major depressive disorder. So you could just start. I'll ask the question again and you can answer. Okay.
But I was on the road. Okay.
You
Okay, that's fine.
were. It's okay,
Yeah.
girl. So, um, okay. So can you? Let me see.
Such a brain fart.
You're okay. It's okay. You were on a roll. You're
I
fine. Don't worry about it. It's like the one edit that we have the
know.
entire episode. You're fine. Um, I'm gonna ask. I'll separate it. So I'll start with the mental health, and then I'll ask you about physical. Or if you end up going into physical, that's fine too.
Okay.
I feel like I need to burp. Hold on. Okay, I did not want to answer the question, and it happened there. And I'm gonna actually make a note that this was around the 30-minute mark
Okay.
to edit. Okay, so Erica, you touched on this earlier, but can you talk a little bit about how unresolved grief can sometimes lead into other mental health challenges and disorders?
Oh, absolutely. Unresolved grief, if we're not actually taking it head on and we're not facing it over time, for some people it can be right away. It can gradually, get worse over time. So let's say, for example, you don't have the tools to cope. So your coping mechanisms aren't healthy. If you're using substances because you can't sleep. And sleep patterns start to become a sign of depression, right? So you're not sleeping, so you're using substances, or like I said earlier, that glass of wine turns into a bottle or two just so that you can get the rest that you think you need, but your body's not actually resting because you're messing with your chemical imbalance. And so you're not really rejuvenating your body and being able to show up as your best self. You're starting to mess with your brain waves and get foggy, mindset. And so over time, you keep coping in those type of ways. What tends to happen is, sometimes often what happens with people, they start to notice signs of MDD, which is major depressive disorders, and you're isolated or you're angry or you're sad or you feel hopeless, and that's how you start to have these mental disorders come about, because you're not actually addressing them when you need to, and it's never too late, because what you don't want is to get into a moment of having that hopelessness to the point where it's like, I don't want to be here anymore. And suicide ideation, I tell this story all the time. It's not a story, I kind of frame it this way. Suicide ideation, we always think about it in a way that's like, oh, I want to take my life, or I have a certain way I want to take my life. You can have subliminal suicide ideation. This isn't official or research based. This is just kind of my observation of people. But we do things to kill ourselves over time. We start drinking, or we don't go to the gym because it's like, oh, I'll go tomorrow. Oh, and I don't put myself as a priority, so I stop working out. Now I'm eating like crap. Now I'm having all these different health issues that I've almost created myself because I didn't deal with the grief. And I don't realize that that's what I'm doing. And so I start to just say, I'm going to just do whatever. Who cares? We're all going to die anyway. So you're killing yourself over time without directly wanting to kill yourself, if that makes sense. Or present with, official suicide ideation where you actually are in crisis mode all the time. It can happen in the background and you're not realizing it. You're doing things that are ultimately damaging you and making it detrimental to your well-being. And we deserve better. We deserve to live our best lives. We do. We deserve to see the light at the end of the tunnel. So grief can trigger different mental disorders to come about over time if we don't take care of them.
Okay, so you mentioned a lot of different things in terms of what like how unresolved grief shows up for us in our mental health, and then even how it impacts our physical health. And that's so important because essentially we're talking about our body being in a state of stress. And with that, we get inflammation, which is heat in the body. That means that our organs are being impacted. It means that our muscles are staying in a tense state. There's a lot of very difficult things that happen for us physically that create a lot of the physical ailments, some of which you already named, like high blood pressure and so on, being at high risk for stroke and so many other physical conditions. And so, even if someone doesn't prioritize their mental health or can't conceive of that, just knowing that like your physical body is actually being impacted anytime we're talking about our mental state. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then one of the things that stood out to me earlier when you were talking about avoidance is clients who might be in that space where they have isolated, they've gotten to a point clearly where they're like, okay, something has to change, and they're willing to come talk to you, but you're a stranger. So if they've isolated from their loved ones, like what do you do to help build trust with them?
I think isolation is it's one of those things where you have to know that it's time to, if you're ready to get out of it. And so by the time you've reached out, there's something in the back of your mind that is telling you like, okay, I do need to make a change. So I'm really gentle. I'm not gonna pressure someone to just pour out their heart. We're gonna take it step by step. I try to make sure that we're doing the right assessments in the beginning. You're giving me your whole story so I can understand who you are wholly. If this is just a change in your life and how you presented differently before, I look at it from your perspective as a client. And then we work together. Sometimes people aren't comfortable right away, and that is okay. I'm just here to encourage and empower, but also empower you enough to see like, okay, but you made that call, so it's time for something to change or shift, and just help you navigate through that, using different approaches, like Cori, like you said earlier, we may intertwine evidence-based approaches to fit the need of our client and making sure that I'm giving you the best tools to help you in your scenario, not based off of me, based off of you and what your needs are. And so I definitely have to empower you. And I'll still, like I said, I'm going to be real. I'll be honest, but I'm going to be gentle because I understand you're in a gentle space. You may be vulnerable, and I'm proud of a client for getting to that vulnerable space in order to be helped. And so those are some of the things that I do. It's just more about helping you open up, see your truth, and help you get to the goals of where you want to be. And typically it's change or shifting or navigating through it and actually taking it head on. And we're going to do that side by side.
I love that. So you talked about how you support clients who are ready enough to at least step in to the therapy space, be vulnerable. What would you say to encourage someone who might be hesitant about seeking therapy to take that first step?
When you're hesitant, the biggest thing is to look at your environment, look at your surroundings, look at how you're presenting. Think about self reflection. What changes have you seen in yourself? And although you may not be ready to take that leap, just understand that you do have professionals that are here for you, and I'm here for you. And think about how you want things to go. Figure out if you are ready to equip yourself with the tools you need And if those answers are starting to be like, nah, maybe I do need help, or maybe you haven't realized it, just do a little bit of self reflection and digging, and figure out your goals and where you want to be. And research therapy, research what we do. There's so many stigmas out there around what therapy can be, but you may learn that what you need is actually in therapy, and not seeking outside sources that may not be ready to equip you with the tools you need. So it just takes self reflection to get yourself there, but don't give up. Encourage yourself, do your research, because what you want to do is spend your time wisely, and be in the mind state and the stage and ready to accept that help. So
Mm. Yeah. So if somebody is listening and they're thinking, oh, I know somebody that really needs Erica's support,
mhm.
or they themselves want to schedule with you, how do they do that?
Yes, so go to chillcounseling.com. Check us out. Look at the team. You can find my bio. It has some information on who I am and what type of therapist I am. And schedule that 15-minute consultation. And be real and raw with it. Go in with intentions. We give you some tools to even get through that, and asking me the right questions, figuring out if my approach is right for you, and figuring out if I'm the counselor for you. And also making sure that I can help you. I'm equipped to help you. And so it's a very transparent process. We make it very easy for you, make you comfortable. But that 15-minute consultation, it speaks volumes. You get to really understand me as a therapist, and spend the time, and figure out what it is that you need in therapy. And just being raw and
Yeah.
honest and vulnerable about it.
Yeah, and it's free. So there's no
Yes.
real like risk. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
let me see what she's about. Like maybe they vibe with you here, but
Yeah.
they want to see like one on one, how are you? Can you actually listen to them and so on?
Yeah.
And then it gives you a chance to fill them out and see if you want to not want to, but maybe you want to, but to see if you feel comfortable helping them, if you believe that you can. And so that is really a great tool.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, so if you'd like to learn more about the team, you can definitely go to Chill Counseling at Chill Counseling on Instagram, or our website, as Erica said. And we'd be happy to get you connected. You'll just fill out the free 15-minute consultation request form, and you can request Erica if that is who you'd like to work with. Otherwise, we'll get you connected with someone else that we think might be a good fit. Erica, thank you so much for your time
Yes,
today,
thank
sharing your
you.
story.
Thank you, Cori, and thank you for having me. I love this, and I enjoy it, and I thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing more from you on the podcast.
Absolutely. Until next time.
All right. Until next time.